You're listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies. And today, my guest is photographer Chris Levine. And we're going to be talking about the brand new documentary about Queen Elizabeth entitled Portrait of the Queen. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Oh, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure having you here. What an interesting film. You are one of many photographers who had the privilege of taking beautiful photographs of Queen Elizabeth through the years. And it's just fascinating to hear all of your different perspectives about taking photos of her. I mean, how amazing was that? I want to get into your style and what you do and how you decided to create a portrait of Queen Elizabeth. But what was that like for you when you got the call to come and photograph the Queen?
Well, when I got the call, actually, I thought it was a friend of mine pulling my leg because it seemed a bit far-fetched. I'd shot rock stars and even Indian gurus, but the Queen as a hologram, because I was shooting her in 3D, just seemed a bit too far. But it was a great honor, and I really put my heart and soul into it. And ultimately, she gave me another sitting, two private audiences with her, and we had a good relationship. It was a really nice interaction that I had with her.
How amazing. How amazing. So what was it like? I mean, what was she like with you? I mean, does she have as I said, there are a lot of different interviews in this film with the various photographers who took portraits of Queen Elizabeth, and everyone's perspective is obviously very different. So what was she like with you when you met with her? Because your style is very different. As you said, you were shooting.
Yes, and I was shooting her in 3D as a hologram. And a week before the sitting, I got a call from Angela Kelly, her assistant, to say, "What would I like Ma'am to wear?" And up until then, she's the Queen, and I was going to shoot her as she turned up on the day. But then I got a chance to go through her wardrobe, go through the crown jewels, and so,
Oh, you did.
I styled her, and that was quite surreal now, even now looking back on it. But when she turned up on the day, exactly 3 o'clock, wearing the dress that I'd been holding up a couple of days previously, thinking, yeah, I think this is the one. And when then I'm standing in front of the Queen of England wearing the dress that I'd selected for her and having to explain to her what I needed her to do during the sittings. Yeah, that was pretty surreal.
I can imagine. I can imagine. So, I mean, were you really nervous? I would be really nervous. Were you really nervous?
Well, it's been in the diary for about 3 years, and I was pretty blasé about it. It was, for me, it was, I was working on a project, and I was, in kind of work mode. But about a week beforehand, it, did, the nerves started to get to me because, I assumed there'd be rings and rings of bureaucracy around her and people telling me, how the image needed to be, and that because it was commissioned by the island of Jersey, I assumed that we'd need the three leopards of Jersey and Mont Orgueil Castle, all these props and iconography in the image. But no, none of that. It was left entirely up to me where I took the image. And that was a certain amount of freedom in that, but that was quite daunting. She's the most portrayed woman in history. And I from the beginning I wanted to create an image that was an evolution in portraiture, not just in the medium I chose, but just in how I wanted to connect with the subject. And yeah, I was that week beforehand, so I got nerves, but you kind of need that to keep you on your toes. But I had a second sitting with her because originally it was just going to be one sitting, and I had to get it, I had to get it in the can, and I felt that I did. During that first sitting, Her Majesty left the room after an hour and a half, and I felt that we got the material, which was a bit nerve wracking because we designed a 3D camera especially for the shoot. But Her Majesty left the room, and I immediately lay down on the floor, and it was like, hallelujah, we've done it. There are so many things that could have gone wrong, and I'm still lying on the floor. And one of her aides walks back into the room, the yellow drawing room, to say, Her Majesty enjoyed that. If you'd like another sitting, you just have to write. So she gave me a second sitting, and then I had hindsight. Then I could look at the material I'd shot, which I thought was fine, and I did make some tweaks and some fine tuning, and actually the magic happened in the second sitting.
Oh, interesting.
Looking back on it, the first, yeah, I mean, the first sitting was quite fraught in a way it was unfamiliar for her. There was a lot of technology in the yellow drawing room. It wasn't just an artist and an easel. I had it full of all these different kind of scanning technology, and she was I could see she was a bit kind of perplexed by it all. But also, George Bush was staying with her. Security had never been tighter at the palace. I remember Prince Charles was getting it in the neck and the press about something, and I don't think it really was her best day to have a portrait.
Mm-hmm.
And but the second sitting, it was much more relaxed. And Chris, nice to see you. And it was really gentle, and I knew exactly where I wanted to go with it as well, because it turned out that that first sitting was just a practice. So I just went for the shot, and it was magic. I sometimes feel I just channeled it. Lightness of being. It was when I was first getting into meditation, and I was really trying to connect with her breathing, with the camera pass, and I was trying to take the work into a kind of spiritual dimension, and it happened in that second sitting. I just was acting out some kind of higher orders somehow.
I love it. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because it's one of the aspects that you talk in the film about is meditation and the use of light, and how just being present in the moment. I don't. I'm sure everybody feels this way, but I hate having my picture taken. I mean, a lot of people just, especially if it has to be a formal picture. I mean, it's one thing when you're just out and about, and you're having your picture taken, but
Mm.
it's another thing when this is going to be used for something, a headshot in my case. And, you're very critical of yourself when you do this. And, it's nerve wracking. So, you wonder, so your approach to it, I loved, but just sort of getting in that meditative state and as you said, channeling it, from a higher place. And I love that. How did you come to that, to this way of the way you work? Use.
Mm. Well, what I'm trying to do with my sitters is to try and get them still. And I always think, like stillness is a portal to the divine. And with meditation, it's about entering the space between thoughts. And I shot Elton John's portrait for his retirement a few weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
And, he famously, yeah, huge fan, my whole life. And it was a great honor to do that as well. But he famously doesn't like having his picture taken. And, he's been shot by some of the greats. And it was a great honor to do this image that was going to mark his retirement. And so with Elton too, as with the Queen and all my other subjects, I try to take them to stillness. And sometimes I use different techniques to do that. With Elton, I had him sitting on I had a Bluetooth speaker emitting this certain sound frequency, which was under his chair. And it got him so chilled, he nearly kind of nodded off at one point. But really got, really calm, still. And then you get in touch with like an inner truth.
Mhm.
And with Her Majesty, I think sometimes with the eyes closed as well, you get people just to rest into themselves, and you somehow, when you look at the image, you connect something with something deeper. Takes it into a spiritual dimension, and so a lot all that's become my thing now. Where because I thought portraiture was something I'd do later on in my career. I mean, a lot of my work is about light. I use lasers, and I do installations, and um, but portraiture is something I thought I'd do later on in my career. But for me, it's about inner light.
Mhm.
And I mean, with the Dalai Lama, I got to do his portrait. And if you can get that stillness in the image, then when you look at it, it has a certain resonance to it.
Right. Well, you catch their soul.
Yeah, that's
You
what
can,
it's about,
yeah,
basically. Yeah.
capturing their spirit, their soul, whatever word we want to use, their inner light. Yeah, exactly. It comes through when you have, you're right. Exactly. I meditate every day. So, when you get into that
Mm, you
space,
know.
yeah, that you can, and it's not always easy at all to get into that place of,
No, that's right. That's what they say. The practice of meditation, because you do have to practice it. It's we're not naturally, and we can sometimes wake up in the morning and we don't feel rested because during the night our minds have been active. But to get still, if you can achieve it, and even just some moments in a day, things recalibrate, and things can never get too far out of control because you're always pulling it back to center. on a regular basis, and that can be really helpful. You're and ultimately, the idea is that you're dealing with truth, or you're dealing with life as it really is, not as you want it to be, and you're trying to force everything to work with how you want it. You are dealing with things as they are, and that's a good place to start. And then you can do what you need to do and do the best you can, and the next right thing. But it's up until but you've got to start from a basis of keep it real.
I love that, Chris. What a great, great reminder for all of us, to do that. Because right, we get going throughout our day and we get, and then we don't stop,
Yeah.
and then who knows what, lots of things can happen from that. But if we remember to take a deep breath and, and calm ourselves down and get back to a center, life does work a lot easier when we are able to do that and be present enough to know that that's what we need to do for ourselves too, because that's also hard to remember too. So what a wonderful reminder. So with the Queen, you had the first sitting and then the second. How much time between the two sittings did you have?
Well, I haven't told many people this, but actually, think about all the interviews I've done. But actually, between those two sittings, when I was offered a second sitting, Buckingham Palace came back with a date, and it did. I can't remember what it was at the time, or I think we were going to make some revisions to the camera, but the date didn't work for me. And I put it back. Actually, no, that's not right. Because good, And looking back on it, I can't believe I did that. But she gave me another date, another option, and that's the one we took. And it was about 3 months later,
Okay.
and that. So then I had plenty of time to digest and process what I'd shot, and really think. And it was just slight things that I changed. And for instance, on one of the things I asked for when styling her was I wanted a very simple A-line dress, but I wanted a number of different capes because I thought she could put on a cape and it can change the look very quickly just by putting on a cape. Whereas in a fashion shooter, you can change the light, you can shoot this angle, you can do that. There's none of that because of the 3D geometry with the camera. I was going for the shot. Everything was set up, and the height of Her Majesty, the distance away from the camera. So but what I could do was change the look by changing very quickly a cape. And when she put on the ermine, the big fur, that was it. But on the first sitting, I was kind of looking up at her, and on one of the capes was a military cape, and it was looking up, and the angle there was, she was like, it was almost quite dictatorial. It was not like this a being. So I softened it. I brought the camera angle up, and it made all the difference, in that second sitting. And we often kind of wish we had hindsight, but I did that. In a way, it's quite good that I didn't know I had that second sitting, because I really, all the focus and intention was to get it right on that first sitting, and I went through all my processes, my creative process, and I got to a level, got to a result, but then I could just for some fine tuning, really, you know, it made all the difference. And then I had two private audiences, one to one, to show the work in progress. Because in between the two sittings, I had one meeting with her to show what I'd shot in the first sitting, and talked to her about the title as well, how she felt about equanimity, which is the formal title to the portrait, because it didn't need to have a title. It wasn't, it was just going to be Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II by Chris Levine. But I felt I wanted a title for it, and equanimity, which is that the word that is used a lot in relation to meditation. And then I had a further sitting to show the final work, and I saw her not shortly before she passed, actually, last year, and she said to me, how pleased she was, because this was during the Platinum Jubilee, where the portraits were being seen everywhere. They were all over the world, and she said how pleased she was that the portraits are being seen so much, and it was really nice to connect with her, and no, it's really very special, and yeah, one of those things, and then shortly after she passed away.
Right. Right. We all miss her. I'll be honest. We all miss her. And
Mm.
this is just a wonderful documentary, to remind us, really we got to see more of who she really was too, from each of the different photographers who did portraits of her, and each of their perspectives on this. So let's talk a little bit about 3D. Talk a little bit why that's different and why you chose that.
Yeah. Well, originally the curator who was appointed by the island of Jersey, because the portrait was commissioned to celebrate Jersey, the island of Jersey, in the Channel Islands, 800 years since they broke away from France and pledged allegiance to the crown. And they wanted to mark that 800 years with a modern portrait. So they appointed a curator to oversee the commission and to choose the artist. That was Gordon Young, who's now a great friend of mine. And he put together a short list of artists, and one of them was me, because I was experimenting with holograms and more kind of future technology, because the image wanted to commemorate the 800 years, and it wanted to speak about that. And so having a hologram was quite futuristic and contemporary, and it didn't need to be an oil painting or a photograph. It wanted to be something quite modern. And so I was exploring all kinds of different ways of using light as my when I was kind of going through the proposals to what I was going to do. I was thinking of all kinds of ideas, and then arrived at the hologram. But holograms have always fascinated me. They're, to look at a real hologram is just like to look at the object, and it's really there. It's phenomenal. But then that's quite a laboratory exercise. It's not a studio process. It's a very technical subject. And I have to kind of bring in highly technical people to work on my holographic projects. But one of the things is it means shining lasers onto the subject. And I thought that could really kill the project at the last minute when we go through the health and safety. And what, Chris, you want to shine lasers at the Queen? I mean, what happens if you blind her? And I just sensed that wasn't going to go down well with the palace. So right at the last minute, I changed it to a photographic technique that creates a 3D image, which is essentially a normal photographic camera moving along a track and then shooting the images from left to right. And it's what's called a lenticular. And typically it has about 100 images. Each one is a slightly different view from left to right as the camera goes past. And then when you put a lens onto the front of it, your two eyes see only two of those images at any one time. And if we get the geometry right, it's what's called a stereo pair, as you see things and you read the perspective. But it often gets called a hologram. It's become a generic term to anything 3D. Oh, it's a hologram, but the hologram is actually a laser photograph, very technical. This is a lenticular, but it's very three-dimensional.
So,
And so, for instance, the ones that are in the National Portrait Gallery are on light boxes. And so, commissions that I've done, and then I've shot some amazing subjects from, Kate Moss and the Dalai Lama through to, I mean, even Frankel, the greatest racehorse of all time. Shoot them in 3D with a moving camera, and so they're lit up. So they're light boxes and illuminated, and you see the image. You can see the different perspectives. It's really, I mean, it's hyper real. It's quite astonishing, actually.
it is. It's really amazing when you do see it. How did the Queen feel about it when she saw it?
Well, I mean, because people often ask, did you why did she have her eyes closed? I mean, and I was very conscious of her breathing, but I actually asked her to rest in between shots, so she didn't know that I shot her with her eyes closed at the time. On a lot of the camera, all the moving cameras, I was timing the movement of the camera with her breathing, so I could get a sense of calm in the image as the camera moved past. I wanted to create that stillness. But when I got to show her the work in progress, we chose the title together. She was, yeah, I think she was pleased with it. She was pleased. And in fact, interestingly, I had an exhibit because I shot it in 2004, and the portraits, it's in the castle now in Montreal in Jersey. It's, her eyes are open. It's the cover. It was the cover of Time magazine. It was a big thing at the time. But then I had a lot of material that I went on to develop further. And then I did an exhibition a few years later in London, and I called it Lightness of Being, where I showed the full body of work. Because as an image maker and as an artist, I had all this material. I delivered the image, but I've got images of the back of her head, the side of her head, with her eyes closed. All kinds of images that I went on to develop. And so the Daily Telegraph wanted to feature my exhibition, The Lightness of Being, and they wanted to put the image with her eyes closed, Lightness of Being, on the cover, and it was a big spread inside about my show. And I assumed, and then all these images had never been seen before. This was the first time I put them out. I did an exhibition called Lightness of Being in 2008. And I assumed that the Telegraph given that it's Her Majesty's favorite read on a Saturday, which is the Saturday magazine and the Telegraph, that's what she likes to read. I assumed that the Palace and the Daily Telegraph would have been talking together and everything was cool, all permissions done, and fine. I was very happy that. And then I hear on the Friday night, it's coming out on the Saturday, that they didn't tell the Palace, and Her Majesty is going to see the magazine tomorrow morning. And the first time she's going to see the image, likeness of Bing with her eyes closed, is going to be on the cover of the most widely read magazine in England. And the Palace hadn't even been consulted. So I got a call on Monday morning from their press office, and I thought that was it. I'm going to the Tower. I mean, I really thought I was in deep. Yeah, it was a big problem. So I spent 24, 48 hours really worrying. But in the end, Angela Kelly told me, no, because since for instance, one of the images, I bleached her face out. Another of the images was shot from the back of her head, pictures of her eyes closed. It was pretty radical. But Angela Kelly told me, no, you don't have to worry. Her Majesty knows that these because you could interpret these images in different ways if you wanted to. But I did it with love and with good intention. And Angela said she knew that, and Her Majesty knows that you got on well with her. It's not a problem. It was a problem for a lot of the people around the Queen, but for the Queen herself was absolutely fine with it. And confirmed. When I saw her, last July, she was. Yeah, I think in fact when the idea was first put to her about doing a hologram portrait, the official word was that she was tickled by the idea, and it was she got into it. Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So what was the difference you said, between the first sitting and the second, as far as, I mean, you said you're glad you had that redo, I guess, a do-over, I guess we could call it.
Mm.
But did you have you had chosen her, what she was going to wear in the first session, the first sitting. Did you have the same clothes for her at the second sitting? Or did you change it? I know you had the cape and the ermine, but did you change what she was going to wear between the first and the second? And also, what was really dramatically different between the first and the second sitting?
Mm. Well, I mean, first of all, on the first sitting, as I mentioned, I don't think she was in the great mood to have her portrait taken. She was quite difficult to engage with and quite dour and quite. There's other things going on,
Mm-hmm.
and so and also and I went through the process of trying on the different capes, But once I'd seen the ermine, that was it. There's no question. This is what we're here to do. It was the ermine. So in the second sitting, I just locked onto the ermine and we just focused on that. But the atmosphere was very different. It was much warmer and she was relaxed and it was a good day to have her portrait taken. And it really came across, and when I did ask her to close her eyes, because the camera took a little time to reset, there's a lot of light onto Her Majesty. I asked if she'd like to rest in between shots. And she was in a good space, which a nice interaction, throughout the shoot. And yeah, I think looking back, saying I channeled this, well, the first sitting was just a warm up. That was just, it's just a practice and, familiarize ourselves with each other. And she could see how the process worked with the moving camera. And also I had a because in the yellow drawing room, I had incense burning, I had a candle, I had a little ultraviolet crucifix as well. That because I wanted her, as the camera moves past, there's a tendency for the subject to watch the camera. You can't help but watch the camera move past. Whereas actually, I want them to stay perfectly still, and the camera goes past and shoots the 3D. If you move, you don't get the dimension. So I created this ultraviolet cross and I had it set set right out in front of her. So she's looking at the cross as the camera goes past, and and it really worked. It's a technique I've used ever since. Is this target and the cross that the subjects look at, and it just keeps. And then if you look at equanimity with her eyes open, she looks like she's looking right into the distance through you. She's not looking at the camera. She's looking right through you, and it really works. It's a little technique I've stumbled upon.
Wonderful, wonderful technique too. Again, catching that inner spirit, that inner soul, the soul, and that's what your pictures are
Mm.
grabbing. That part of who that person is, the real essence of who they are. Really quick, we only have like a short, well, actually, our time is run out, Chris. I thought we had some more
Oh,
time, but we don't. But thank you. What a fascinating experience to be able to talk to you about this wonderful documentary entitled Portrait of the Queen that will be out on September 5th and before the 1 year anniversary of Queen Elizabeth's passing. So thank you for your insights on just, it's just really wonderful to have you on the show. So thank you so much. You have a
thanks,
great
Jan.
day. Thank you. Take care, Chris. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.